we have 48, my lord. Yes, we have 48 members who have renewed, who are active. Other members have not renewed their membership as yet, my lord, through the powers.
True. And we are also on a drive to get new members as well. So the current number, as Rasainity has assisted, is 48 members. The membership form is available. I don't know if Ancient would be able to also post it in the group as well. For other Asians who might be interested in downloading the form that we do use to get members. And it will also have the certain criteria that we need to have as members as well. And then in terms of the secretariat of the organization, currently we have Ras Moabi, who is the chair and also a founding member of the organization. And then we have Ras Ainiti as well, who is the Secretary General of the organization, and he's also one of the founding members of the organization since 2007. And then it's Ayman Ras Mutwena. I am also a member since the inception of the organization as a founding member. And then we have Ras Chimo, who is currently not available in the meeting. The ancient's position was the member finance, if I'm not mistaken, as the finance officer.
Foreign affairs, repatriation and reparation.
Oh, true, ancient. And then we have Empress Kitami, the Empress of the ancient Papatulo as well, who is also a member as a deputy chair. So there are still vacancies in terms of the secretariat being filled, but those are the current members who are still active in the organization. So this is INI's New Race Consciousness, and we are bringing forward the works, mostly of His Imperial Majesty and Empress Menen, to the whole world community. Yes, I give thanks.
Yes, I give thanks. Give thanks, Papa Mutwena. Papa Mutwena is a spokesperson in the Club of Seven. Yes, of the consciousness. So just to be correct, in terms of Sister Kitami is also working in the office of the secretary as the deputy. Is working in the office of the secretary, not as the deputy director. So the Club of Seven is actually occupied by, Club of Seven is occupied by 5. So it means 2 offices were vacant, but one of the finance, the office of the secretary was still acting in that office of finance. So yes, we give thanks for that introduction, Papa Mutwena. Yes, so in this and I would like to take the opportunity to introduce the purpose of this lecture. You know, basically, as per the introduction by Ras Mutwena about New Race Consciousness and its constitution, basically clause 4.1 and 4.2 of the constitution speak specifically, those are the aims now. They speak specifically to spreading the teachings of His Majesty to the whole world community, and encouraging and promoting the culture of teaching and learning around the world. So this lecture is actually a fulfillment of that constitutional mandate of spreading the teachings of His Majesty, using the Earth Day commemoration of His Majesty to spread the teachings to the world community within reach, and also to encourage and inculcate the culture of learning and in an academic approach, because His Majesty, he taught that we believe that only education can heal Africa. We are of the conviction that only education can heal Africa. So that being the case, and I realized that it is very important for all sons and daughters of Africa to get access to education by any means necessary. as even we have just shared about opening the library, other means and methods that His Majesty was looking at empowering once and once educational. So it's a continuation of those works constitutionally and principal. So in this time, and I would like to take this opportunity to introduce INI speaker, one who is going to be facilitating the lecture. It is Honorable Dejazmatch Kwasi. Yes, Honorable Dejazmatch Kwasi is an entertainment attorney. He has been instrumental in advocating for the rights of artists and creatives. His legal acumen is matched only by his passion for Pan-Africanism, a passion that has earned him affectionate moniker, the Pan-African Happy Man. But Kwasi is not just a legal mind. He is also an accomplished author whose writings have inspired many to action, earning him the title The Actionist. His words are not just confined to the page, but also they find expression in his work as an artist. His art is like his life. They are a testament to his commitment to the Pan-African cause. And then he's also an author. He wrote a very magnificent book, Haile Selassie, Haile Selassie the First, Haile Selassie's Ethiopia, Volume 1. The rise of the priestly warrior kings. So this book is very revealing. It goes also to touch upon even the history and the lineage and the history of also both the paternal and the maternal sides of both Emperor Selassie and Empress Menen, and also both the parents of Emperor Selassie and the parents of Empress Menen. So it's a very insightful book that goes way deep into the lineage. So Dejazmatch Kwasi also has a platform. He hosts a platform, a Lion Voice Network platform, in which discussions about INI Rastafari contemporary livity are ventilated, where even the teachings of His Majesty are shared, where even the reach out and networking, global networking among INI sons and daughters of Rastafari, who have potential to even do great works, do meet there. So the I is doing great works, so INI are gonna be having a very insightful and a very educational lecture delivered by him. So without any further ado, and I would like to give to the Honorable Dejazmatch Kwasi to facilitate the groundings to the powers of the Most High. Dejazmatch Kwasi.
Yes, greetings and blessings in that divine name of His Imperial Majesty, Emperor Haile Selassie I. We say glory and honor in the name of his chosen queen, Empress Waziri Menen. I give thanks for that introduction from the family. This is one of the greatest honors I have had in my years of treading this Rastafari trod, to be invited by my brothers and sisters on the continent to share. This is truly a highlight in INI Chad, and I look forward to being with the IDEM in the physical. We are reasoning with the New Race Consciousness and hoping that we can identify some funding that would allow INI to come and be there physically, and to bring some books as well that INI can share in the joy of this revelation. All right, so today I want to talk about something that I think needs more highlighting, and this is part of my mission at this time in the trod, which is that the lions have to tell our own story. We have to frame our own worldview. We've come up in a colonial worldview, and even the Pan-African worldview seeks to exclude Kadamawi Haile Selassie I. We fight that flesh and blood. We fight principalities and powers in high and low places. So it's up to us. It's incumbent on I as Rastafari to create that Rastafari narrative. We cannot anticipate or expect anyone to include this revelation that I and I have seen, that we have lived. And the important thing about narrative is that it has to be given by those who have lived it. That's why we have coined the term, or our elders coined the term called livity, where we emphasize the way of life. This is not a religion. We always say that this is a way of life. And it's important for I and I to connect that way in life to the source. And that source is living. When we say true and living I, when we say he lives and rules and reigns, these are not empty phrases. This is the acknowledgement of a lived tradition. This is a lived revelation, which is why it becomes definitive, which is why the power exists in I and I without us having to lift up weapons of war or use tactics of intimidation. We have spread to the four corners of creation through word, sound, and power, but it's because the anchor, is a living I, and that living I manifested in physical form and was born as Lidge Tafari Mokonin in Ethiopia. So, the book that I wrote, Haile Selassie's Ethiopia, The Rise, Volume 1, The Rise of the Priestly Warrior Kings, was really to capture this story. As a young university student at Howard University in Washington, D.C., my cousin embraced Rastafari trad, and he was moving with a lot of young Rastas at that time and coming around. At that time, I was taking the persona, of a, GQ kind of very clean cut ladies man. In Jamaica, we would use the term gallus. I was using that type of mentality. And they introduced I to this man, this small Ethiopian king, and I started as a skeptic, because I did not feel that a man could be the Almighty. What kind of thing is this that they are saying? So I began there at the university, using the university resources, a quest, a study. I started to look up. I was naturally curious, always been a reader. And so reading about this man, about the land, it just got deeper and deeper and deeper. It was like you were reading something out of a fantasy book. For example, the birth of His Majesty starts with an epic drought, one of the most terrible drought in the annals of the history of East Africa. When we talk about the Kefu Khan, which started in 1888 and concluded in 1892, we're talking about a drought that killed 90% of the cattle in Ethiopia. We're talking about a drought that 1/3 of the people died, where mass migrations as ancient kingdoms were uprooted in the search of food. And we're talking about a drought that was accompanied by a pest called rinderpest, a cattle plague, which resulted in the death of the cattle. The death of those cattle meant that agriculture stopped. We're talking about an ancient society where the farmers plowed the fields with the ox. So we're talking about something of epic proportion, as if the forces of hell had been unleashed upon the land. You could envision this death at every corner. It was said that the hyenas were so fat that they could barely move. There was carcasses stretched to the horizon. Stench of death permeated the land. The ruler at the time was Emperor Menelik II, who had just assumed the supreme high command of the realm from Emperor Johannes, who had died on the battlefield fighting against Mahdi jihadist forces, which were seeking to conquer Ethiopia from Sudan. Died on the battlefield. He was beheaded and his head taken into the streets of Khartoum. So this is the opening scene that we're painting of the birth of Lij Tafari. It said that Menelik II himself would go into the field to plow, to try to inspire his countrymen in these times. Ethiopia also had borrowed over £1 million from the Italian government, and Menelik was working diligently to try to repay this money because he realized the weakness of Ethiopia at this time. And so he had to put extra taxation on the kingdoms to try to repay this loan. So this was the worst of times for an ancient kingdom. We're talking about the heights of colonialism. We're talking about a time when the Ashanti in Ghana had fallen. This post-dates the fall of the Ashanti. We're talking about the Dahomey Empire, which also falls in 1892. These are the great kingdoms of Mother Africa. Zulu had already fallen. We were already in the heights of white settler rule there in South Africa. Nigeria, we had the last of the great kingdoms of the Yoruba, who had also been conquered. So this was a bleak time for the entire continent. Ethiopia was a seed of independence. Very important that I, when we tell this narrative of the birth of Lij Tafari, that we include the entire spectrum of the African experience, because that is where the power is. We don't have to make up a narrative as Rastafari. We don't have to count on ancient scrolls. Everything I'm saying is searchable and can be verified. And this is the glory that I tried to capture in my book, Haile Selassie's Ethiopia. At this time, we already had the Italians who had established Eritrea on the sea coast. So Ethiopia is surrounded. And my book, I talk about the Islamic influence because internally, the concern was more around the Islamic danger. As I said, Emperor Johannes had died on the battlefield fighting against jihad from the Muslims. And Emperor Johannes, one of the priestly warrior kings that I write about in the book, had defeated many invasions, 2 from the Ottoman Empire. Egypt invaded twice and was defeated on the battlefield. But ultimately, it was the Islamic invasion coming out of Sudan that caused Emperor Johannes to lose his life. So internally, and a lot of times we don't understand that tension between Islam and Christianity on the eastern side of the continent. This was the concern of most of the rulers in 1892. So this is the stage that has been set. We had the conquest of Harar that took place in 1887, right before the great drought set upon the land. King Menelik and his young cousin Ras Makonnen are given the task to subdue the ancient walled city of Harar, which is the 4th holiest site in Islam. Menelik himself participates in the battle. Ras Makonnen earns, his great regard. This is where his legend is being forged. The Battle of Harar, the Harari elite is subdued, and because of the importance, Harar was always a transshipment point for weapons, spices coming from the interior, the Islamic trade routes. So it was a strategic importance to the Ethiopian Empire. So upon becoming emperor of the realm, Emperor Menelik assigns Ras Makonnen, his most trusted general and foreign minister, to become the governor of Harar. So this is a great task because remember that this is an independent city-state, meaning it had ruled as a sovereign kingdom behind the walls. Non-Muslims were not allowed into Harar. Harar itself could be a blockbuster movie, an epic fantasy. This is the same walled city that gave birth to Ahmad Gran, or Gran the Left-Handed, who nearly conquered Ethiopia in the 16th century, and to who I devote an entire chapter. The closest to ever conquering Ethiopia was Gran the Left-Handed, Muslim, who was seen as almost a supernatural figure in terms of his prowess on the battlefield. So Ras McCunnin has given the task to subdue this population. The first thing he does is to build a mosque, refurbish the mosque, and then to build a hospital. So Ras McCunnin, the former rulers of Harar, did not care about people of Harar. The elite ruled and the people suffered. So Ras McCunnin, with his wisdom, was able to alleviate some of the pressure of the people of Harar and quickly gained many loyal followers in the city. So much so that he felt it was safe enough to move his young queen, Waziri Yeshimabet, to the city from Showa. Because remember, this would have been a garrison town at first because it was a recently conquered city. I'm painting the picture, family, of birth of Lidge Tafari McCunnin so that I and I can overstand the glory and the majesty and we'll take it up to him as a young adult, because as we train our young people, it's very important that they overstand this history and that we model them after Kadamawi Haile Selassie I. So, the Kefu Khan, this drought finds Ethiopia in one of the most vulnerable positions. Ras McCunnin, who is in Harar, was not only concerned about maintaining Harar for the empire, but is now concerned about his young wife who had had miscarriages, 8 prior, and who, it was being whispered, was cursed. As a governor, as a noble, he could have put aside Yeshimabet, divorced her. Many things could have taken place, but Ras McCunnin is a man of faith. He's a man who loves his wife, who was given to him, when she was still a child, a young bride. He has another child, Dejazmatch Yilma, from another union. However, Yeshimabet is the love of his life. So when it's found that she's pregnant, he wants to do everything that is possible to ensure that there is success. This is how the move is made from Harar to Ajerso Godo. Ajerso Godo is in the mountain outside of Harar. It's high in elevation, and as I interviewed Ras Ezekiel in Ethiopia, you can see that on my channel, the Lion Voice Network. Ajerso Godo, the place that he was born, it symbolized the East Gate, or the coming, the church that was built there, the name that was given, the Eastern Gate. So this is a portal. Ajerso Godo becomes a portal. This is where the Almighty would enter, and to this plane, Christ consciousness rising again. And at this time, none of that was known to I and I. Remember, we're looking forward. There was no guarantee that His Majesty would even live. He's being born into a drought. No other child survived the womb. of Yeshimabet. So his first cry was a conquest over death and hell. It is written that his first cries were drowned by thunder. That is how my book opened, because it's also acknowledged that the rains came, that fateful day of July 23rd. So his birth entered with the drought, and I have no concrete evidence. I've taken the liberty in my book to create the narrative because just based on the facts that I see laid out, I believe that the name Tafari or Tafari, which means one to be feared or respected, was given to him by his father because of the dreadful nature of that thunder and lightning that roared in the heavens after such a long period of drought and no rain. So you can imagine, when the people are gathered around Yashimabet to see birth and to ensure that she survives, and the sky becoming darkened and the thunder and the lightning, flashing, thunderclap. The baby is born, Taferi, one to be feared, one to be respected, he who inspires all. Great and terrible among the heathen is how our elders communicated this to I and I. Terrible and dreadful. So, Lich Tafari is born, and it is said that he was immediately taken away from his mother to ensure that he was not the victim of a curse or anything. Of course, they were reunited shortly thereafter. But at that moment, that was procedure to ensure that this baby would survive. Ras McConnell, it is said that there was gun salutes. Again, we have to overstand and be realistic, and we're not naive. So Ras McConnell is moving with a battalion of troops. Anywhere he moves in Harar, he has to move heavily armed, because again, this is a newly acquired city. And even though we have built goodwill with the building of a hospital, the building of a mosque, built an Orthodox church as well, we're not naive. Anything can happen, any card can play, So when His Majesty is born, those same troops that are garrisoned in Harar, many of them from Shoa, would have let off their firearms. This is also a show of strength, because in those days, the gunshot fire would have echoed for miles in all directions. So this is also a show of strength of the empire. Baby has been born. It would have been celebrated far and wide on that fateful day. And 40 days after the birth, he is given a baptismal name. And again, this is part of the mystic, because that name is a name that was not common before this granting of this name to this baby boy. And that name was the might and the power of the Trinity, Haile Selassie the First. This is a name, in the Revelation, we read that it's a name that he alone knew. There is all this. And when we even check the history, we notice that all of the ones who were present during that baptismal would have died by the time of the coronation. So there is a good chance, I have not done the full research, but there's a very good chance that is really His Majesty alone was aware of this, at the time when he was to be crowned and chose the name, his baptismal name, Haile Selassie I. The accounts of his youth, we know not a lot, and I'm speeding through because I know the timing. I'm trying to be respectful of the time. I'm very long-winded, so if you make me go, I can't reason all day. The young Tafari, this is where we learn about the Christ consciousness. Because remember, at this time, we know not. All we know is that Rasmussen have a son that is born. And yes, he has conquered death and hell from his first breath because he did not die. So he's already greater than all of the fruit of the womb of Yoshimabet. He is in conquest. When we read the Revelation, we read about the dragon that stood at the womb to consume. So again, we don't make up these things. We just look at the history and we see the correlation, to the prophecy. But this Christ consciousness, His Majesty said that as a child, he did not get in trouble like the other children, but he did get in trouble. Why? Because he wanted to learn more than the teacher. The teachers grew tired. His tutors, Dr. Vitellien from out of Guadeloupe, Martinique, Abba Samuel, and other great teachers that were surrounded. Rasmussen had traveled outside of Ethiopia, so he knew the importance of exposing his son to a very rounded education. Lich Tafari is a homeschooled child. He's a product of the highest degree of homeschooling. He would have been exposed to the ancient script of Ge'ez and learned it from a tender age, meaning that he was able to read the Old Testament in its original language. I see a brethren here named Anunnaki. And this is important because remembering that the Ethiopian Bible contained books like the Book of Enoch, Book of Light, Book of these things. So the esoteric, these are the books that contain the teachings of the angel, those beings that do not have their origin on this planet that we call Earth, but who were sent here. These are written in the ancient scrolls. So we have to remember, he would have also been exposed, to the teachings of Kush and all of these ancient kingdoms, because Ethiopia, they maintain this information in their mystery schools, because remember, Ethiopia conquered as far as India and Arabia of old. And these are things that we don't talk about, is the esoteric knowledge that's contained. But as a noble and as someone who was so ravenous, the Christ consciousness is ravenous for information. It consumes, and we see this characteristic throughout His Majesty's entire reign, that quest for knowledge and information. And this is something that I must embody as the Rastafari faithful who are called by His name. There are encounters with Europeans. There's a encounter when he was a mere teenager that speaks about, the European comments, how intelligent the young Lich Tafari was, and how he quizzed them about firearms, asking them about the modern and how knowledgeable he was about armaments. Because at this time, as a son of Rasmussen in Harar, they're concerned about armaments and the independence. Again, Ethiopia is not a place of naivete. It's a place that you have to defend your sovereignty. It's a place that was in perpetual war for hundreds of years. Some you could say even thousands of years. So these accounts come to us, they trickle out to the West. So already by a young age, he is, there are whispers about Rasmussen's son, something different about this youth, excellent in all his works and all his doings, but small because this is a tiny youth, His Majesty was a short man. And I say to all of us, it's great that the Almighty manifests as a short man, because it lets those of us who are not tall, have a model of how to move through creation when you're not the biggest person in the room, but yet still His Majesty commanded, His presence commanded that respect and honor. You know what I mean? So it gives us an example of, how to move. And as a child, it would have been even more stark how small he was as compared to his compatriots. But again, the intelligence, diligence, mental fortitude was like nothing that had ever been seen. And one of the remarkable stories is at the passing of Ras McConnell. This is one of the legendary stories that is told somewhat in the autobiography, but you have to read between the lines. But what happened is that when Ras McConnell passes, before he passes, he calls his generals into the room and has them swear fealty or loyalty to the young Lich Tafari McConnell. His cousin, Emperor Menelik, they also decide, based on Ras McConnell's request, to appoint the title of the Dejazmatch to the young Tafari, who is at this time 13 years of age. Again, diligent in all his work. So he would have deserved the title in truth and in rights based on where he was. He was the talk of the town. The generals, they cry, at being asked this request. But because by this time, Ras McConnell has now not only officers from Showa, but he has won the loyalty of the Oromo chiefs. He fought at Ottawa with the Oromo cavalry. Some of the greatest horsemen in the realm were the Oromo cavalry from Harar, the Somali, ethnic Somalis who are also in Harar, Harari, even some of the people of the Ogaden. These people serve Ras McConnell. So Ras McConnell's army is one of the most powerful armies in the realm, private armies, most well-trained armies in the realm. And at this time, even though Ethiopia is unified, remember that each kingdom, there are private armies that serve the Rasses. This is still the period of the great Rasses. King Mikael from Wallop, you know what I mean? You have King Haile Malakat from, I'm sorry, Tekle Hai Malakat from Gandhar. So you have some major Rasses, Ras Mengesha from Tigray, the great Ras Alula. These are armies. So Ras McConnell army, which consists of both Christian and Muslim, is one of the most powerful armies. So the generals swear their loyalty to a young teenage Tafari. So when the funeral happens in Addis Ababa, and all of the Rasses come from the provinces to pay their respect. And in this time, you would come and you would camp with your army in a field. There would be all around Addis Ababa, the flat plains. There would be armies encamped. And this is, for weeks, because it takes time. You're riding by horseback to reach these places. And so when the armies are stretched out, this young teenager comes to town with this massive army of some of the most well-trained, and the people are talking, because the officers were not swayed by any talk. They're only following the orders of the Dejazmatch, Tafari. And, Emperor Menelik, there's concern because they're wondering if he's going to try to take over power. They don't know what the move is, but the thing look intimidating. They ask the Dejazmatch Tafari to stay in Addis and to send the army back to Harar. There's a school that's happening. But when the word goes forward, they won't move. So the Dejazmatch has to go out to address the army. This is the only person they look to. So when we look at the prophecy, when it says a child shall lead the way, You can imagine this young, small, tiny teenage boy leading out this massive army of some of the greatest warriors of Ethiopian history. You know, it said that the people lined the streets of Addis Ababa to see this youth leading out this army. Um, you know, so this is the legend, you know, how the legend rises. So I want I as Rastafari family to understand that by time the Dejazmatch becomes Ras, the legend has already permeated the realm. We can talk about the wars that were fought. There were many wars um, of ones that rose against him. There were plots of murder, intrigue that had to be navigated. His ideas sparked fear in the nobility and in the church, you know. But because of his knowledge of the ancient scrolls and the ancient script, this is why he was able to navigate within the church, because the bishops, the monks in the monasteries, they knew they did not know more than the Dejazmatch Tafari. His knowledge outstripped the whole of them, which is why he was able to negotiate for Ethiopia's church's independence, go to Egypt and reason with the high and the nobles in Egypt in the church, Coptic church, and get them to release Ethiopian, is because his knowledge was without parallel. And again, the access to information that he had was without question. There's a book called The Mission by Hans Lockhart that I would also recommend, who was a German, who was His Majesty's librarian. And he talks about how His Majesty, you know, would order books from all around, rare books. He collected rare books from all around creation. And that many of them His Majesty would read in their native language. He was fluent in Latin, German, many other languages, and he would read these texts, you know, the original texts. So again, this illuminates the Christ consciousness that is within each and every human being, and which I cite when we embrace Kadamawi Haile Selassie within I, which is why we are called by his name. And as we celebrate the 132nd Earth Strong of Leech Tafari, you know, it's important that we, in our respective spaces, go over the history. And that's why I'm so honored. One of my greatest achievements in this trad has been the completion of the work Haile Selassie's Ethiopia, right? Volume 1, The Rise of the Priestly Warrior King. So everything that I said in this sound is in the book, along with many other things. We didn't talk about the astrological alignment of the stars that took place. There were so many other factors, and I tried to write a book that encapsulated all of the different aspects of the birth. I'm currently starting my research for volume 2, which will take place from 1893 up to 1906, when he became the Dejazmatch. So we'll be covering the Battle of Ottawa and all of that history in the second volume. I want to just give thanks for everyone who has purchased the book so far. Ras Ainiti, in particular, you know, one of the greatest moments I had was receiving Facebook message from the brethren saying that he had read the book and his family had read the book, and seeing images of his daughter reading the book and these things. This is what keeps I working, you know, in the long hours of the night. Once know I have many pursuits that I engage in, but it is knowing that we are able to leave a legacy that will outlive I physical, that gives us the passion. And this is a work of passion, a work of love, a labor of love, to write, to ensure that there's no one else telling our own story. I say on my network that the time has come for the lions to tell our own story. And that is the work that I am engaged in right now. I pray that each and every one of you will join I and I on that journey. If you're not following the Lion Voice Network on YouTube, please follow that journey. And I'm looking forward to a great renaissance within Rastafari. And the existence of the new race consciousness in South Africa is evidence that Rastafari is rising, that Rastafari greatest moments stand before us. And I from the West are preparing to unite with our brothers and sisters. Many have already made the trod, many more are in preparation. And we are coming forward. We are ready, and we want to just encourage the organization, the centralization. Our elders who rose from Jamaica, they set a tradition. They greeted His Majesty in the physical. They did all that they could, you know what I mean, to spread this word sound to the four corners of creation. And our generation, we are the generation that seek His face. I was born in 77 after His Majesty disappeared from creation. Our generation is, our job is to take the baton and to create the institutions that will preserve this legacy that our elders who took the beatings, the persecution to give us this heritage. And so the writing of books, the building of, Rastafari independent non-aligned media, the building of, I have an episode right now about Rastafari insurance company. Do we need it? Rastafari construction companies, Rastafari schools. This is the work of this generation. And I know New Race Consciousness, which puts an emphasis on education, is part of answering that call. So I will seal there and we can reason more in the question and answer. But for these few words, I really do give thanks, Isis.
Yes, we give thanks, Honorable Dejazmatch Kwasi, for this insightful, educational, very charging, lecture that one of the rarest, lecture, which touches on the earliest, life, the birth and the earliest life of His Majesty, Haile Selassie, in his advent as Lish Tafari, the eye indicated that it is the 132nd, Earth strong of the king. The eye started off by, touching on the epic drought, the Kefuken, as it were, that befell Ethiopia at that time. I understand it was a 3-year drought, as it is documented even by other scholars like Pankhurst and Professor Pankhurst and others. The eye has also touched upon the earlier works of Rasmakonen, the environment which would have molded the raising of Tafari, so that even I and I get a picture and understand the environment in which Tafari grew up, and also the understanding that since Rasmakonen's army was one of the largest army, it would imply that even Tafari, at inheriting the army of his father, would have inherited the largest army in Ethiopia, and that would have made him a factor, to be reckoned with. And that he was also even accorded the rank of the Dejazmatch at the age of 13, very rare even for many ones to be entrusted with responsibility at that young age. So many remarkable things that the eye has been able to outline there, and especially that the Eye Majesty was interested in collecting books, he was interested in literature. He was well versed in what they call sacred, or sacred knowledge, as it were. So he was very versed in a whole lot of books that even I remember. Okay, is Hans Willem Locolt. Yeah, Hans Willem Locolt is the gentleman who wrote that His Majesty actually is the one who enjoyed making those collections. And Raskwasi also indicated that he's busy now preparing for his second volume of the book. So I would recommend also seeing that even the first volume is very rich in facts, that I should also try and look out for the second volume and try to get a copy of I. So the book also is forwarded, as I man realize, it's forwarded by the former president of the Haile Selassie University, Professor uh, Aklilu Habte. Yes, Professor Aklilu Habte. And it is also forwarded by Prince Ermayas Sale Selassie. So he is the great-grandson of His Majesty Haile Selassie, of his youngest son, Prince Ermayas, Prince Sahle Selassie. And, he is the president, currently is the president of the Crown Council of Ethiopia. So the book is very reckoned also by very esteemed dignitaries and officials of the institutions of His Majesty. So even I would like to give thanks and ISS for the to make it to be present and share his time and share his insight with I. So at this time, I would like to give to Sister Kitami to moderate the question and answer session. Yes, Sister Kitami.
Greetings in the esteemed names of His and Her Imperial Majesties, Emperor Haile Selassie I and Empress Itege Menen Asfaw Sila. I am Pindiwe Kitami Mpulu, a proud participant of the New Race Consciousness. Allow me to say, Ancient Kwasi, your lecture is thought-provoking and will greatly stimulate great discussions ahead. Well done, Ancient. We give thanks. Now I am going to outline the process that we are going to follow concerning the question and answer session. As we move to the question and answer session, I will allow one question per person and will try to accommodate follow-up questions later if time allows. Now let's move on to the question and answer session. Who would like to ask a question? By show of hands. Anyone with a question? Litlotlo noted. Papa Mwabipule after Litlotlo will follow.
Greetings. Greetings. If I have my hand raised, shall I ask my question now or at a later time?
Yeah, it's muted, sister. I think if you're speaking, you're muted.
Okay, you don't hear the I now?
Oh, Mother, I will give you the opportunity when the time arises, ne?
Okay.
Isis Muma. Or let me start with the first question. Litlotlo Walete Giogis Mpulu would like to ask a question.
Blessed greetings, family. My question is specifically directed to the Dejazmatch Kwasi. I read in your book that immediately after the birth of His Imperial Majesty, he was separated from his mother. So my question is, did His Imperial Majesty ever get a chance to be breastfed by his mother? Seal.
Ancient Kwasi, how are we going to do it? Is the elder going to note down all the questions? or the
No,
agent?
let's respond to each question in turn.
Isis agent.
Yeah, as far as I understand, that was only temporary. His mother lived another, I think almost 2 years after his birth. So he would have been with his mother. His grandmother, which is his mother's mother, was also very active there with them. But he would have been reunited with his mother once they were sure that he was healthy and able to survive on his own, because none of the other children were able to live to that stage. So once they saw that, then he would have been reunited with his mother, but it was not for a long time because she would die in childbirth before he touched the age of 3. So even though they did spend some time, it was a very tragic story being separated. So basically, you're looking at someone who grew up almost as an orphan because Ras McConnell was very rarely present because he had to go to campaigns. This is a time when there were uprisings in Tigray. Menelik marched his army to the border of Tigray in 1892 at the beginning of the year to put down a rebellion in Tigray. So it's a very unstable time. And the only reason he turned back from Tigray is because of the Kefu Khan. And there was so much famine. So, you're dealing with a child that's very rarely seeing his father other than, in formal settings because his father had so much duty. And he speaks about this in the autobiography that he would try to get his father to eat and, very formal type of, the love that they spoke about. But he was 13 when he lost his father, so still not fully grown child. So His Majesty, for all of those who grew up, without parents, is also an example of how we can overcome and be great regardless of the circumstance that creation throws at I and I. So these are the lessons and the narratives we have to give to our young people. Give thanks.
Blessed ancient.
Isis. Papa Mwabi, you are next.
Thank you, Sister Kitami. My apologies for not being able to turn on the video camera right now. I would like to send my sincerest appreciation to Dejazmatch Kwasi for the presentation done on the birth of Her Majesty. And secondly, I would like to greet everyone who's participant on the platform in South Africa and in the diaspora. I think I must say that for Iman, I feel quite blessed to be the second person to ask a question to Dejazmatch Kwasi after Princess Litlotlo. When NRC was established 18 years ago, Litlotlo was not yet born. And today, our little professor is a member of New Race. And in this historic virtual lecture, she takes the opportunity to ask the first question. I think that's history in the making, worthy to take note of. And it also ensures and give a sense of guarantee that indeed the future lies with the young ones. And institutions that are of this nature are well secured for future's sake once properly entrusted in the hands of the young. once. And I think in one of the presentation of Dejazmatch, Kwasi was talking about how the young Dejazmatch Tafari was leading an army, you know, of well-respected Ethiopian warriors, as young as Her Majesty was at the time. And in sort of like symbolic terms, we've just witnessed that young little child taking the lead and breaking the ice and asking the question. Coming to my question to you, Dejazmatch Kwasi, it's on the issue that you've touched on. I think it's quite important, the Ethiopian Islamic relationship. How important that is in terms of one's look into the history of the study of Ethiopia or the Horn of Africa, and the implications of those relations today. What does it mean as in a country as ethnically diverse as it is? So what I would like to check with you is how in today, because those relations are still there, whether in terms of peace or in terms of wars. How do we begin as Rastafari community to understand the relationship between Christianity and Islam, and particularly as it plays itself out in the Middle East? Thank you.
This is a very important question because we're on the cusp of a great war between the Abrahamic religions. And it's very important for I and I as Rastafari to understand the role that Ethiopia plays. In 1954, when His Majesty visited the United States of America and addressed the joint houses of Congress, both the House and the Senate, one of the points that he emphasized was that Ethiopia and the king of Ethiopia presides as he who presides over the Christians and the Muslims. Ethiopia is the linchpin that provides that peaceful relation between Christianity and Islam because of the history dating back to the Prophet Muhammad, who sent his early followers to Ethiopia, to the Christian king for refuge. So this act of kindness from Ethiopia and the decree from the Honorable Prophet Muhammad that, you know, there should not be war made upon Ethiopia, that Ethiopia is a friend, provides the linchpin of positive relationship between Islam and Christianity. Why I said this is important? Right now we have a great conflict in the Middle East. In the Kebun Grass, it says that Solomon had a vision that the sun set on Jerusalem and rose in Ethiopia. When we get to Yeshua, it said that if the town reject you, not one stone would remain. And this was referring to same Jerusalem and these things. These things are landmines, are landmarks that we have witnessed along the journey. Now, in the 770 AD, the Roman general Titus invades. The last of the African Hebrew Israelites are chased out of Jerusalem. The rebuilt temple is destroyed, and Jerusalem enters into a period of Islamic rule, where the Alas Mosque is built upon the ruins of the Temple of Solomon. Today, we have a European Jewish regime that is there, that has stated openly on the extreme that their goal is to rebuild the Temple of King Solomon, the third Temple of Solomon. They have created an alliance with fundamental Christian in the United States of America, and they have armed themselves to the extreme to be able to fulfill this destiny. Before October 7th or October 6th, that just kicked off this latest round of instability, there was a shipment of a red heifer to the Middle East from Texas, which is supposed to be the bloodline or the genetics of the cattle that would be sacrificed to dedicate this third temple. So there are many of us who believe or who looking forward to know that part of the reason for the annexation of Gaza and the West Bank is to clear that space of internal adversaries prior to them destroying the mosque, the Elas Mosque, which currently sits in Jerusalem, for the building of the temple, the third temple of Solomon, which, according to the Jews, the European Jews will initiate the return of the Messiah or the Messiah, the Jewish Messiah, and according to the fundamentalist Christians, will bring back Jesus Christ. So this is where we find ourselves globally. So we're looking at, we know once that's done, the Islamic world is going to rise, and there is going to be a conflict. And it's written, this Battle of Armageddon, and all of the nations are preparing for it currently. So the way that we preserve, because remember, we always say as Rastafari, Ethiopia is the entire continent of Africa. And one of the biggest problems that we have on the African continent are what they call jihadist movements that are rising up around the continent to destabilize. These are being funded primarily by, allegedly, by Western colonial powers to allow resource access. This narrative, the Ethiopian narrative that provides us with peaceful coexistence of Christianity and Muslim, declaration that Ethiopia, the land of the sunburned face, is the entire continent of Africa. This provides Rastafari with a narrative that we can instill, because remember, these jihadists that are being manipulated, they're all youths. All of the wars in Africa are being fought by youths. And by us being able to have this powerful narrative and this history and arm to let the youths know that if you tried Islam, it doesn't mean to fight your brother or to create war in Ethiopia, which is this African continent, but this continent must be a bastion of peace and security. And this is why it's so important when we talk about narrative and having a story that we promulgate as Rastafari that will ensure peace, because the narrative that is being pushed presently is one of war, one of division, one of tribalism. And I do believe that Ethiopia is that link that provides that ability for Christian, Muslim, Islam, and traditional African religion to live in peace and security, because we're also not telling the Omo Valley family that they must change and become Christian. His Majesty rule over all. So I think we have a powerful opportunity to create a working model through our livity of Rastafari unity and how it can apply to create a new reality for the youths of Africa that allows us to live in peace and security. Give thanks.
Thank you very much, Papa Mwabi, for that great question, and also to you, ancient Papa Kwasi. And now I will allow the platform to Empress Queen Mother Moses.
Where am I? Greetings.
Greetings.
Greetings, Royal Queen.
Yes, family, yes. I want to first of all give thanks for this platform and the opportunity, to really get this history most of which, yes, I do know, but every single day I learn something new. And thank you, Dejazmatch Kwasi. Today is one of those days also, you know? So we give thanks for that. And the work of, because this is July, and I give thanks for the month that was chosen, because I and I recognize July as Rastafari month because of the birth. So we give thanks that Lich of Royal Birth gave the world this month. One of the questions I would like for you to talk about a little, or the issue, Dejazmatch Kwasi, as you had gone over the astrology, you know, the stars and, you know, what was happening and this, you know, so the Sirius moon. Please comment on that and the time period and the significance of what was going on and the prophecy that was fulfilled with the birth during that time.
Okay, I'm trying to see in my book here if I can find it and read a little piece of it. But essentially, you know, there were planets that were coming into alignment at this time that had not come into alignment since the 16th century at the birth of Emperor Jacob. So in Ethiopia, there were astrologers that were looking at the stars, looking at the heavens, and they knew that there was going to be some type of significant birth at this time of the alignment of these stars. And there were prophecies in connection to this alignment and this, hold on one moment here. So it really, I'm trying to, I want to read a little, if I can't find it, then I'll just go off of memory. But the term that is used is there's a heliocentric connection and Jupiter, and I believe it was Pluto, in terms of planets and their intersection and the significance of what this represented was this again contributed to the legend formed around the son of Ras McConnell. This contributed to why a name like the power, the might of the Trinity was given. But again, I want to emphasize that at the birth of His Majesty, none of the achievements